This is my review of the year podcast, and it's been quite a year for me, both professionally, on the podcast, and personally as well, because you might be able to hear I'm on the beach at the moment, strolling around barefoot on the beach and recording this podcast in December with a light jumper on, and that is because me and my family have moved to Portugal. So there's a bit of a personal update in here, how we got here and how I got to Portugal, and there is all the highlights from my favourite guests of the year. I've had some well, I don't want to blow my own trumpet. Yeah, I do want to blow it actually. I've had some astonishingly big name guests, and with the help of my producer Alison, I'm so chuffed at some of the names that I've had on. So we will bring you clips of those interviews. I'll tell you why I ended up on the beach here in Portugal and lots more. Hi, I'm Tony. I'm an author, presenter at Sky Sports, and years ago I went to the jungle and got ill. Very ill. So this is my podcast adventure to find more energy. It's packed with biohacking, science, health tech, supplements, and some of the most well-known experts on the planet.
This is something I spent 4 months of my life doing with electrodes glued to my head so that you can do a lifetime worth of meditation.
Decide what you don't give a fuck about, which is something you don't care about.
Some of it gets quite out there.
I had some stem cells sent up to my house that I had stored, and then I injected myself with mannitol.
And we even hack hangovers.
Alcohol is poisonous. So is water and oxygen in the wrong dosage.
So that's my podcast, Zestology. Live life with energy, vitality, and motivation. Hello again, welcome back to Zestology. Yeah, I am barefoot on the beach at the moment, and the story of the year is coming up in a podcast way, because we're going to be looking back at my podcasts and really some of the podcasts that actually helped encourage me to move here to Portugal. Zestology is a podcast that's almost been going 10 years now. I think our 10-year anniversary will be in early 2025. And it's evolved over the years, but I'm thrilled to say that this year, 2023, has still had some big name guests, and it's been great. So what happens in this review of the year show is I just go over some of my favourite guests that I've spoken to over the last 12 months, play you clips, and tell you the story of the year. And this year, I'm going to tell you a bit about me and my family's story as well, because it has been an astonishing year. We started off the year in Southeast Asia. I think when I became a parent, it's obviously one of, if not the most incredible experiences of my life being a parent, and wonderfully fulfilling as well as very challenging at times. But I think the one thing that I was resigned to was holidays in a caravan from the age of sort of 4.5 till 18 while my son went to school. And one of the revelations of this year is the fact that we've realised as a family we can still travel, we can still have adventures and experience different cultures, and combine that with my son's education. And we started off the podcast in Thailand, and we recorded quite a few podcasts from there. And my son went to school in Thailand, and if you're ever interested in doing something like that with your family or on your own, do go back to January, February, March, and the podcasts I recorded then. It was so hot there. It was just brilliant. We had a great time, and I think that experience gave us the confidence to realise that we could try something different in our lives. So let's start off this review of the year podcast then. Enough of our experience, but I will tell you more a little bit later. And let's start off this podcast review of the year 2023 with Andy Mant, podcast 421. Zestology episode 421. And Andy's based in Australia. I was in Thailand at the time, and we looked at, Andy is the founder of Bon Charge, and Bon Charge has just absolutely taken the biohacking world by storm. They've got so many brilliant products, and he's very forward thinking, because he just sees, people really want things like an affordable red light device for their skin on their face, for example, and he just goes and makes it. And we looked at how light impacts your health and well-being. We talked about blue blockers and EMFs and living your best life in a technological world. And here is Andy Mant.
It doesn't just come down to blue light passing through your eyes. A lot of people don't seem to understand fully that melanopsin, which is your blue light photoreceptor, is actually present in your skin as well. So if you're wearing blue light blocking glasses in an evening and you've got artificial standard LED lighting, that's still going to disrupt your melatonin levels somewhat. and impact your circadian rhythms within your skin, even if you're wearing the blue light glasses. So what we've done is we've created circadian friendly lighting, which has stripped out all the blue components. So after dark, you're only seeing what your ancestors would have saw all those hundreds of thousands of years ago, which is ultimately when our circadian rhythm was evolved and was processed. We're living in this world now of tons of artificial suns with an ancient circadian rhythm. And it's just scrambling our hormonal systems, disrupting our sleep, leading to stress and other chronic issues. I typically don't do much computer work in the mornings. I tend to like the natural light in the mornings. That helps to sync my circadian rhythm right up until about solar noon. And then it becomes a bit of a problem after that for our circadian rhythms. So I slip on the yellow lens glasses, helps bring the correct light messages to my circadian rhythm, keeps it all in check. And then when that sun sets in the evening and I finish watching it, I'll switch over to the amber red lenses that block up to 550 nanometers. And that helps lower my cortisol levels, jack up my melatonin, and get me ready for sleep.
Okay, from episode 421 to 426, and Paul Austin. And you may remember that I spoke about Paul Austin last week because Paul Austin was in my books of the year, The Power of Small Doses, Unlocking Healing and Growth with Microdosing and Psychedelics. And do you know what's really funny about when I interviewed Paul Austin? I wasn't in any way interested in microdosing at that point, and now I am. Maybe he sparked my interest. I guess he probably did, to be quite honest. Paul Austin is one of the absolute experts in the microdosing space, and he came on Zestology to talk about this area, and I sort of dipped into his book before I interviewed him. Since then, I've read it cover to cover, and I've got to say I find it quite a life-changing concept. As I mentioned on the book review podcast, microdosing is not something that we've looked at massively. It's obviously illegal in a lot of countries depending on what you're microdosing. Paul gave a very illuminating overview of the subject on Zestology. So here he is.
There's archaeologists that believe that the early use of psychedelics 30 or 40,000 years ago was responsible for the birth of religion, was responsible for the birth of sort of spirituality, of recognizing that there's something bigger than ourselves, et cetera, et cetera. So there's ancient use of psilocybin mushrooms in particular. Now that is somewhat controversial. However, we have hardcore fossilized evidence of peyote. So peyote is a cacti that's in Mexico, the Jalisco region. And the indigenous people of Mexico were using peyote over 15,000 years ago as well. So we see in multiple areas, sort of geographically around the world, that there's been psychoactive plant medicine use for tens of thousands of years. And I think in addition to that, we know that ayahuasca, which many of your listeners have probably heard about at some point, the tea that's made in the Amazon, there's evidence that that's been used for over 1,000 years. We, as sort of a Western culture, if you will, there was an experience called the Eleusinian Mysteries that Plato and Aristotle participated in ancient Greece, which happened once a year. In these greater mysteries, they use something called kykeon, which is a beverage that's made from ergot, the same thing that LSD is made from. So we also have archaeological and anthropological evidence that we as a Western culture have been using psychedelics for 2,000 or 3,000 years. Why is it prohibited and not sort of culturally accepted is psychedelics have always been, for the most part, sort of an underground thing. It's been a very spiritual thing. It's been a very sort of sacred thing. And so even in the Eleusinian Mysteries, if you participated in the mysteries, you couldn't tell anyone what happened. There were people who did tell others, and they were either killed or kicked out. They had to go to the islands and whatnot, which was actually worse than death in ancient Greece.
This is the Zestology review of the year, and we're going to fast forward now to podcast 429. As I said, I started the year with my family in Thailand. We spent 3.5, almost 4 months there, living there, loving life. And Zestology friend of the show, a man who's been on the podcast a lot, is Brett Moran. He lives over there. He's a meditation teacher. He's an author. He's just all-round good guy, got to say. Such good company. And I went over to the island that Brett was living on my own for a 3-day sort of lads trip. And we got on our mopeds and we drove up a mountain near where he lives. And we looked out over the bay and went into a little cafe and ordered a coconut and recorded a podcast. I mean, what a life he leads, and what a life I was lucky enough to lead for a few months. And just talked about stuff really, about his life, where he's at, what inspires him. And that was a really enjoyable podcast. So here is Brett Moran from my trip to Thailand.
The reason why I'm so encouraging meditation and encouraging like being in the moment is because all I've found over the 20 years of meditating is that is the best buzz in the world.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to be happy in the past or in the future. It might feel like that, but then if you're always planning that or focusing it, you're never really in the moment. And I've just found that when you really are in that present moment, like we got yesterday, like, wow, the colours are a bit brighter. Wow, I can hear the children laughing a little bit more. Oh, wow, I actually feel good. Like, you know, anxieties and fears and stresses, they're physical reactions in the body. There's no denying that.
Oh, absolutely.
But they've come from us thinking about something, whether we actually hear the thought or it's at a very deep unconscious level, which was traumatized and imprinted like 20 years ago. It's still, we've left a moment for maybe a split second. And so for me, it's like, how do you master yourself in the present moment? And then when you do that, you are free. And I think we all want freedom. I think there's definitely something around cold water. So we just jumped in the ocean just now, and it wasn't freezing, don't get me wrong, but there's something about whether it's being in the ocean with all these electrolytes and the salt and just nature, or maybe jumping in the River Thames, or putting literally, when I first started all this kind of cold showering stuff, you know, that was like 10 years ago, and I'd be at my mum's house and I'd just put the cold tap on, and I would be freezing for like 1 minute. And so wherever you are, in whatever environment, you can throw some cold water over your face in the bathroom, or you can just get out and jump in a river somewhere, or come to Thailand with us and jump in the warm hot water in the sea. So I'd say something to do with, it doesn't have to even be cold, just something to do with water in your face in the morning just seems to wake me up. So that gives me a bit of energy to perk me up.
Now, that was episode 429, and it was called Zen Travels, Exploring Thailand and Elevating Your Meditation Practice. And then the next podcast that I recorded was with Alex Hyam, who lives in Portugal and also runs Exhale Coffee. And we thought we'd record a podcast about relocating to different countries, especially when you got kids, and we called it Wanderlust Wellness, and we called it Navigating New Places and Healthy Lifestyles. And Alex sparked a little interest, a little glimmer of an idea in my mind when I spoke to him. Because me and my wife Faith had already spoken about how we'd love Thailand, but we didn't see it as a place we wanted to live long term with our boy. But we were interested in trying something different. And after I spoke to Alex, I sort of spoke to him off podcast as well, and then I spoke to Faith, and we started to think maybe we should look at various places in Europe. So you'll hear me talking to Alex about his experience in Portugal. What ended up happening was we ended up coming to stay with him, looking around Portugal and moving to Portugal as well. So thanks, Alex, for the inspiration. And that really is the story of our year. You know, we decided, it gave us the confidence to realise that we could do something different. And it's not particularly even easy upending your life. There are an incredible amount of administrative things you have to do, not least visa-wise, but in terms of everything from cancelling your council tax to getting your car insured in a different country. And I mean, the main thing is for us was like schooling, which just was so complicated. But it was all worth it, and it was also first world problems. I mean, it wasn't that hard. And Alex helped give us the confidence that it might be possible over here. So here was Alex from Exhale Coffee on Zestology episode 430.
You know, a big part of coming to Portugal was because surfing has always been my number one sport for 20 odd years. But then living in London, it was really difficult to go surfing. And then having kids, it was more difficult. And I've always dreamt of moving to the coast, so close to the sea. And here we're 10 to 15 minute walk away from a surfing beach. It's literally that close. And I've surfed on that beach twice.
You joke.
And we've been here since September.
You joking?
And it's just because, I know. And it's my own doing, and I don't want any pity for it, but I just literally, I find it so hard to leave the computer and there's so much work going on. I'm trying to build us up towards this crowdfunding raise, which is hopefully launching in a few weeks. So I don't really have time to miss anyone or miss anything. Maybe I just miss my having my own mind. But I've not got to that point. And the coast here is just, it's like huge, like 100-meter high cliffs plunging into the ocean. And you've probably seen pictures of them where they're like the yellow kind of cliffs, which are just lit up by the most insane sunrise. And every day we see the sunset from our balcony, and the whole sky lights up with this insane array of beautiful colors. And we're just like, every day we're like, wow, the sun's kind of sets over Africa in the distance. And you're just like, yeah, it's good for the soul to watch that every day.
An excellent podcast that I recorded this year was one on EMFs with a real expert in the EMF space, Nicholas Pino. This was Zestology episode 432, Are EMFs Harming Your Sleep? Navigating the EMF Maze, Bluetooth Earbuds. Oh, if you're listening to this podcast on Bluetooth earbuds now, oh dear, you might want to go and listen. Well, don't worry, you'll be all right in the short term, but you might just want to ditch them in the long term. You might want to go and listen to episode 432 with Nicholas Pino. It's a good one.
There's a lot of uncertainty around EMFs, but what we already know is concerning enough for us to just make simple changes to minimize our exposure. You might have electricity phobia, and there's probably a real phenomenon in some people, but this is not what doctors are reporting that I'm talking with. We're talking about people who first get sick and then realize that a smart meter was installed near their bedroom. Then they remove the meter and then they get better. But in the case of cell phones, it's pretty much everywhere also. So it really made me realize that not only is it everywhere, but we're exposing ourselves through devices that we're addicted to and handing those devices to kids. And then I realized, my God, this is huge. This is, in a sense, more dangerous or more concerning than many pesticides and other environmental toxins that on an everyday basis, I was already trying to avoid or reduce as best as I can, trying to eat organic and avoid BPA. But we're all trying our best. But when it comes to EMFs, I was clueless. I did not know what to do about it. And it led me to writing my book, The Non-Tinfoil Guide to EMFs. And a lot of people don't understand the topic. And there's also this culture in people who work with telecoms, tech, a lot of people that are part of this culture, it's part of a culture of no effect. It's look, this is the latest scientific understanding of EMFs, and there's some concerns here. Just saying that is controversial among these people.
This is the Zestology review of the year, my final podcast of 2023. Thank you for listening, and I'm delighted that I've had so many big and interesting names on this podcast this year. And one of the ones that was fun was Sunetra Sarkar. Sunetra is a presenter on Loose Women. People know her from her acting career as well. She's been on all sorts of top TV dramas as well. And yeah, she is one of the much loved presenters of Loose Women. Absolutely brilliant. As a boat goes by in the bay. Don't know if you can hear that. It's really quite nice on the beach here now as I walk around recording this podcast. And Sunetra asked me to go on her podcast. So I drove down to Bristol one day. She had an excellent setup with cameras and all sorts. And I played out our podcast because I thought it was quite an interesting chat. And we sort of chatted a bit about her and a bit about me. And so we did a dual podcast. Sunetra is definitely a late convert to the world of health and wellness, as she herself openly admits. And since then, she's gone on to do the BBL therapy on her face that I spoke about, and I will speak about on this podcast a little bit later on. And she's getting really into biohacking and everything else. And it's just been fun making friends with her. And we've had a couple of good get-togethers as well since this podcast. So this was episode 438, and it was called Lights, Camera, Healing. I was quite pleased with that one. Sunetra Sarkar on Zestology.
So, today's guest is somebody that I found whilst Googling and falling down many various self-care rabbit holes. Tony Wrighton.
I'm glad you Googled me.
Thank you. Yeah, you are my first Google hero. I've been fangirling you online. And so I wanted to know, really, the truth is, where's the beginning of your journey? How did it all start?
I first got into all of this. I've been studying NLP for almost 20 years, but then I went to the jungle on holiday and I got very ill. And I came back and I had 3 months in bed. I got this virus and the doctors couldn't work out what it was. Turns out it was actually quite similar to long COVID, the effects that I had after that virus. But then I had 3 months in bed and I was TV presenter at the time at Sky. And I thought, if I ever get out of this, it'd be great to do a podcast about energy because I don't have any at the moment. So that's how it started, really.
So you started off by mentioning NLP. That was before you entered the jungle.
Yeah, that was ages ago. Yeah,
right, and what is that?
That is neuro-linguistic programming. And I'm an author on neuro-linguistic programming. It's a study of how people do things well. It's a set of communication techniques on how you communicate with yourself and other people.
Sounds like a winning lottery ticket. Like literally somebody gives you a template on this is how it works. Yeah. This is what you should do to make it work.
I mean, I think it is. So the reason I got into it is not because I wanted to write books or do podcasts or anything else, but I felt like I needed something myself. Okay. Before we started, you and I would talk about therapy a little bit.
Yeah,
and I went down a rabbit hole and I found NLP. And I just found it for me. I definitely sort of needed something.
Interrupting this podcast for a moment to tell you that today's podcast is brought to you by my signature program, the Healthy AF Method. It's all about healing, optimizing and transforming your health with NLP and energy psychology. And if you go to tonywrighton.com/healthy, you will find all the details on the Healthy AF Method. It's taken me way too long to put this program together. Months and months of blood, sweat and tears to put the Healthy AF Method together. But what I wanted to do was combine mindset and health, and I think I've done that. If you fancy embarking on a health transformation, if you want to help your healing, if you want to live the Healthy AF lifestyle, and I know a lot of people who listen to this podcast do, elevate your health IQ and become your own health advocate. And if you're interested in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, the stuff I've been talking a lot about on this podcast for many years, then every lesson in the course is based on a different NLP technique, which I love. You'll get to set and achieve health milestones and spark your health creativity and conquer your health anxieties as well. So if you fancy unlocking advanced techniques and transforming your health, then go to tonywrighton.com/healthy. There's also a community which has been brilliant, actually. I'm really, really pleased with how that's going. That's a WhatsApp group where we've been having a little chat on there. And I just think the other thing to say is that the early testimonials that I'm getting from people who've been signed up to the course for the last couple of months have been gratifyingly nice. I'm so thrilled that people are finding it useful. So if you want to look at the most overlooked aspect of health, which is mindset, there's so many studies to prove how when you get it right, what's going on in your head, your health starts to improve. The link between mind and body is so well established, and yet it's the thing we ignore. Then go to tonywrighton.com/healthy, and I tell you what, if you use the discount code POD10, you can get 10% off. That is POD10. You'll get 10% off. tonywrighton.com/healthy. Now back to the show. Okay, we're moving into June now for our podcast review of the year, and June is always a big month in London and was particularly big this year because there were two events back to back. There was the Health Optimisation Summit, which I was hosting, and the week after there was Glastonbury. So first up, here's a little taste of the biohacking mayhem on episode 440 on Zestology, of what was going on at the Health Optimisation Summit. I was hosting on the main stage and I also spoke as well. And as always, Tim Gray, who you may know better as at Tim Biohacker, who's been on this podcast quite a few times, did a brilliant job of putting together an amazing show. So I thought I'd whip out my microphone. It's not a euphemism. And record a short podcast on the scene. Right. Just bumped into Angela Foster. I have to say my favourite part of today is just chatting with so many people. I love that. The introvert side of me is going to have to go home and rest, but it's just so much fun. It is like a festival, isn't it?
It is like a festival, and I think this year there's more people than ever, right?
Yeah.
It's got such a great atmosphere.
Yeah. What's your favourite hack or biohack?
I was actually on my way to go and try out a headset someone had mentioned.
What's that?
That's to do with, I'm not sure. I'm looking for it. Because I said, is it Brain Tap? Because I've got one of those and I'm obsessed with Brain Tap.
What is Brain Tap? I can see them down there.
Yeah. They put lights between your ears. They have a visor over your eyes, and it's basically reprogramming your subconscious mind and your beliefs. and it's phenomenal.
Just bumped into Pauline Cox.
One thing I'm so excited to see is a mainstream publisher getting low carb and eating in this way out to the masses. And that just, I feel like that's such a sign of how things are changing. I think that gift of being able to help so many people in one sitting. I mean, someone said to me recently, does it affect you? Do you get nervous talking in front of people? And yeah, sure, we all get that little element of nerves and self-doubt and imposter syndrome. But I think when you recognize that your message can help so many people and you set yourself aside and just think about the information, being a conduit for this information and getting it out there, that really helps me to get outside myself and really focus on these incredible people who've come here to learn and to really optimize their own health.
So that was episode 440, and the very next weekend, there was quite a tight turnaround time on that podcast. Basically, I recorded the podcast, I went home on the Sunday after the Health Optimisation Summit, and I edited it myself so it was ready for Monday morning. I just wanted to make sure it was good and it was out there. And the very next week, it was Glastonbury. And like last year, we were lucky enough to get tickets for Glastonbury, and there's all sorts of different aspects to Glastonbury. It's not just about having fun. There's like huge healing fields. There's lots of sort of inspiration, not just creative, but also the green fields provide a lot of the sort of content that we would normally cover on Zestology. So I was going to record another podcast from there. I did that last year and it worked really well. And it's always nice to be recording podcasts out and about. And it got to Sunday afternoon and I'd had a brilliant time at Glastonbury, and we went for 3 nights this year. So this was the longest we'd left our son, and my mum very kindly looked after him for 3 nights. Oh, and it was just so great having a bit of time to ourselves, and 2 of my best mates were there as well, and we were all in camper vans. And it got to Sunday afternoon and I just stopped, and I suddenly thought, do you know what? I don't want to record I don't want to record a podcast. I just want to carry on having fun. So I recorded a very short 5-minute apology for a podcast, and this is what happened. Honestly, I'm too tired and I've left it too late and life has got in the way. We've had a brilliant time. The story is going to have to be saved for another time. But if you were expecting a full podcast today, I'm sorry, because that's not happening. I'd love to blame someone for it. Oh, my wife's here. Maybe I could blame you for not having recorded a full podcast. I've only got myself to blame. But we've had a good time, haven't we?
Oh, it's been amazing.
Been amazing, yeah. And I've sort of lost my voice as well. We have seen all our favourite acts that we wanted to see. We've had a great time. We've got some excellent friends here who we've managed to meet up with. A miracle, because there's 200,000 people here. And more than that, I'm not even really going to sort of bother giving you the full Glastonbury experience. I'm going to save that all for another time, and suffice to say, sorry if you're expecting a full podcast here. I'll make it up to you. Maybe there'll be a midweek episode or something like that. What are you pointing at? Oh, a statue of Spider-Man. Our son would like that, wouldn't he? But look, it's windy and I'm going to go off and have some more fun. And thanks for listening to this extremely short mini podcast from Glastonbury. Sorry there's not more words of wisdom, but I really should know that sometimes I just want to not record podcasts and have fun, and that's what's happening today. So see you next time. Okay, so that was a non-podcast really, wasn't it? Let's move into July. And this is probably one of the biggest guests that I had on Zestology this year. One of Oprah's favourite people, Arthur C. Brooks, came on Zestology. He's written a brilliant book all about the second phase of life and fearless aging, and which actually featured in my Book of the Year as well, in Book of the Year review podcast as well. Oh, he's a brilliant man, and it was a very inspiring podcast. Arthur C. Brooks, Fearless Aging, Getting Old Without Getting Scared.
If you set yourself up to understand yourself through the eyes of others, woe be unto you. It's a very human thing to do. There's a whole philosophical body of thinking about this. This is the two selves thinking that's very common in Zen Buddhism, but also in the West, as popularized by the philosopher William James, and it's the I self versus the me self. Mm-hmm. So when you're looking in the mirror, you're the looker, but you're the lookie as well. You're two people. You're the I self, I'm looking, I'm observing, and there's the observed, which is the me self. And people tend to pay too much attention to the me self. The world is full of mirrors, literal mirrors, but metaphorical mirrors as well. Your notifications on Instagram and Twitter, those are mirrors. And if you're in show business or you're in the media, man, that is just a hall of mirrors. And so you're just going to get hooked into the me self. There's a lot of research that shows that if your me self is too heavy compared to your I self, you'll be anxious, you'll be depressed, your emotions will be quite brittle, you'll be unable to be resilient to setbacks. You'll be kind of a facsimile of a real person, a cardboard cutout. What I'm saying is that your real happiness is not going to come from these worldly rewards, money, power, pleasure, fame. On the contrary, they're going to make you more and more frantic. If they go the wrong direction, it'll make you positively unhappy. If they don't, perhaps the case of Rupert Murdoch, at very least, you're going to have to keep chasing.
Let's fast forward to podcast 452 now. Another big name guest that I had this year was Dr. Jill Christer. I read her book on mold and found it extremely inspiring, and I know I have some mold issues, historic mold issues, probably from living in mouldy student houses 25 years ago. I have those issues myself, so we reached out to Dr. Jill Christer, and she came on the podcast, and we called this podcast Break the Mold, Unmasking the Hidden Perils of Mold.
We ended up with mold in my own home. It duped me. We moved into a relatively new home, and it was in the summer. We had the windows open, so there wasn't the immediate thing. And then slowly, as we closed up for the winter, we were getting sicker and sicker. And then it was one of those slow drip kind of things that eventually did expose itself that this was a water problem. And that's when I went, oh, this is mold. I'm not going into perimenopause. My kids aren't crazy, all these things. It was just like, oh, I know what to do about this. And I knew the remediator I wanted to work with. I knew the inspector to call. I knew the protocol to get us all on. And I thought, I need to write a book because everybody should know this. It's not rocket science. The symptoms get very scary and profound, but that doesn't mean it isn't treatable without profound things, so everyone has the control and the power to get better from this. So the general method or approach that I use is kind of 5 steps. The first one is avoidance. So not only getting away from the mold or remediating or whatever you need to do, but also what are your habits, hobbies, things like that might be inducing more fungal burden. Because basically what's happening with that mycotoxin is it's sending a message to the microbiome of your body and your sinuses, on your skin, in your gut, that mold is trying to move in.
Well, that was episode 452, and as if that wasn't good enough, we then reached out to Dr. Anna Lemke, the author of Optimisation, and she came on the podcast in September, I think it was, and that was episode 453. That was the next podcast, and if you haven't read Optimisation, it's a brilliant book, and one of the areas that I felt like she particularly helped us is an area that constantly comes up on this podcast, navigating the digital dopamine rush. What to do when you really want to put your phone down or you just know that it's not really serving you, but you can't. And it's 1 o'clock in the morning and you're wondering why you're checking Bitcoin prices. Oh, that's just me. Anyway, here is Dr. Anna Lemke. This was podcast 453.
So dopamine is a chemical that we make in our brain. It has many different functions, but one of its very important functions is to mediate the experience of pleasure, reward, and motivation. It may be even more important for motivation than it is for pleasure, but it's involved in all of those processes. The more dopamine that is released by a substance or behavior, the more reinforcing it tends to be, which is another way of saying the more willing the organism is to do the work to get the reward. But dopamine fluctuates in response to these ingested substances or in response to these behaviors, which is to say, after a sudden upward spike or increase in dopamine firing, our brain adapts to that by decreasing dopamine levels, not just to baseline levels, but actually below baseline. That's a dopamine deficit state before going back to the baseline position. And while we're in that dopamine deficit state, we experience enormous craving for that drug as a way to restore baseline, or what neuroscientists call homeostasis. And that state of craving, is natural and normal, and evolved over millions of years of evolution in order to get us to be the ultimate seekers, always looking for more, never satisfied with what we have. But unfortunately, that system for restoring homeostasis is woefully mismatched for the modern ecosystem, where we have these drugs at the touch of our fingertips, so that when we experience that craving, we don't wait. We continue to want to consume more and more and more. And over time, we essentially can get to a point where we change our hedonic or joy set point.
In late September, I travelled to Harley Street and I went to meet Dr. Meg Manassian and tried a new form of therapy called BBL therapy. It is what's gene-rejuvenating, and it's incredible the way it works. It uses light to rejuvenate your skin on your face. This was a really enjoyable podcast, not just because Dr. Meg Manassian is excellent company, but because I got this amazing treatment on my face, and I could just tell straight away it had worked. It was weird. Right from the start, it sort of brought the moles out on my face, and then the moles started to come off. Now, if you want more on this treatment, or if you want to go and talk to Dr. Meg about doing it yourself, then the episode is 454, but here's a little excerpt for you.
BBL is broadband light. This is the most advanced and sophisticated system for IPL, which is known as intense pulse light. So what we're going to do with the machine is target various aspects of your skin. So it's great for anti-aging, it's great for brown spots, it's great for red spots. And we're going to use multiple different wavelengths, different filters of light to target different chromophores.
We're starting with a low energy level.
Okay.
Because I just want to see what you can tolerate.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to literally just do, this is what it feels like on your skin. Feels a bit cold. And I'm going to just deliver one shot like that, just so that you can understand what it feels like.
Could you just recap what the different light wavelengths were that you get?
Of course. So we started with 515 nanometers.
Yeah.
Which was the most superficial wavelength that we used. And that was to target your brown spots, which are superficial in the epidermis. And the target for that is melanin. That's what the 515 wavelength sees.
Yeah.
Then we moved on to the 560 nanometer wavelength so that we could target the reds in your skin. So 560 is absorbed by red blood cells. Hemoglobin is the pigment that absorbs that wavelength. We were just mainly focusing on these areas around down the sides of your nose on one little red spot.
We are approaching my final clip now that I'm going to play you in this Zestology review of the year. It's all about home detox, an area I think is particularly important. And I looked at, with Laura Ruffner, or at Miss Biohacker, if you follow her on Instagram, on reducing toxins in your home and how when you do that you can supercharge your health. It's something that I've thought about so much, and even when you think you're getting eco-friendly products, are you actually doing so? Laura is an expert, an absolute expert in this area, and I really enjoyed talking to her. And this was Laura Ruffner on episode 463.
Indoor air is really not that good because we have furniture that gases off. We have particulate matter from cooking. Sometimes we have mold issues. So first of all, I look at indoor air, and the best tip for that is to open your windows frequently, get fresh air, and that's the best thing you can do, unless you live in a big city and the outdoor air would be more polluted than the indoor air. Then it would not be a good idea, and in that case, I recommend an air filter. And I know that a lot of people claim that plants are really good for indoor air, but I researched it, and I researched it deeply. They do improve indoor air, but you would need to have so many plants for them to really make a difference. So it's good to have them. They are also good for other reasons, for mood enhancement, etc. But for indoor air filtration, plants alone are not the thing I would recommend. We're exposed to so many toxins already on a daily basis. So when we have it in our own hands, then we should do something about it. Because when you go outside and you're exposed to outdoor air pollution, you can't really do much. But everything at home, especially your cleaning products, are not that expensive to change. I even recommend to do some of them yourself. And it's really inexpensive and it makes a big difference. The clothes you wear, your laundry detergent, your bed sheets, and you also wash your bed sheets in laundry detergent. So that already makes a big difference. Actually, a lot of people develop skin issues like eczema because of the detergent they wash their clothes in, or their shampoo or their soap, etc., etc.
That is pretty much it for this review of the year. Thank you for listening. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. The first podcast of 2024 will be my traditional goal-setting 2024 preview podcast with Dr. Stephen Simpson, my old friend from the NLP days who I met almost 20 years ago. And, well, it's amazing because we've been recording these goal-setting podcasts at the start of every year for so long. And over the years, it's changed. The priorities that we have in terms of goal setting and setting New Year's resolutions have totally changed over the years. So you will want to listen to this one. Spoiler, it's already been recorded. Me, on New Year's Day, I'm going to be here in Portugal and I do want to swim in the sea, and I'm very excited about that because I swam in Devon in the sea, I think, last year, and it was pretty cold. So this is going to be a nice change. Well, it's still going to be cold, but maybe slightly less cold. Yeah, it's been a mad year, but thank you for following along on Zestology. I really appreciate it. When I was in Thailand and London and here, I've had lovely messages from Zestology listeners, and it does make a huge difference when you get in touch. So thank you for that. If you do want to get involved in the Healthy AF method at the start of 2024, I recommend it. I think now would be a perfect time to sign up and get that ready for the 1st of January, or maybe even Boxing Day. If you've got the turkey guilt, you can go to tonywrighton.com/healthy for the latest on that. Combining mindset, biohacking and NLP to supercharge your health, really. So there's 3 different phases of the Healthy AF method, and the first one is healing. So that is like, if right now you need support, that phase is for you. The second one is optimizing, so the biohacking stuff, but all from the perspective of mindset. It's so good. And then the third one is the deep stuff, which we use NLP technique, specifically the technique called logical levels, and that is transformation. So there we're really looking at delving deep into your values and beliefs and working out what's really important for you, and then doing more of that in your life. So healing, optimizing and transforming your health. If you go to tonywrighton.com/healthy, you will learn more about how I use NLP to help you get your head in the right space for supercharging your health. And you use the code POD10, you'll get 10% off. POD10, you'll get 10% off. Thank you for listening along with Zestology this year. It's been a massive year of change for me, but one of the constants has been this podcast, and I'm looking forward to doing it next year for you as well. Thanks for listening. Have a good Christmas or festive season. If you're not celebrating Christmas, I will be back at the start of 2024, and I look forward to joining you then.